Hello again. As you know, I'm Eli the Computer Guy, and today's class is on understanding licensing. Now, wait! Before you touch that dial, before you click away to another cooler class, stay here. Watch this class. Licensing requirements is a topic that far too few technicians ever really understand, and it's a life and death thing in the IT world. You have to understand licensing requirements. So if you want to install a server, what are the licensing requirements? What's the total cost of ownership for that server? It's not simply that you're going to buy some piece of hardware, you're going to throw an operating system on that piece of hardware, and then all of a sudden it's a server, and that's your cost. There are lots of costs involved when you install a server. You have to buy the server license, the license for the server operating system itself. Sometimes you have to buy client access licenses, so you actually have to pay for every single person that's going to connect to that server. Sometimes you have to pay licensing for the number of sockets that are on the motherboard of the server. So if that server can support two CPUs, you may have to pay $1,000 per socket. Sometimes you have to pay for every core on the CPU. So if you think you're going to be really cool and throw in some 8-core processor into the server, that may jack up your licensing fee by $8,000. This stuff's not a joke. So if you are a consultant, or if you ever want to get beyond the help desk position in the IT world, you have to have a grasp on licensing requirements, because this is what the business owners are going to look at. This is what management is going to look at. You're going to tell them, you're gonna tell them you want a new server and all the fancy stuff it's going to do. They're going to ask you, what will that server cost? So this class, we're going to talk about licensing and costs and all the pitfalls that you have to look out for, because this is a horrible little tedious part of the IT world. But if you don't look at the licensing that you're buying properly, you may end up costing yourself or your company thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in fees that they weren't expecting. So the first thing we have to talk about is open source. And everybody loves open source because it's free. If it's open source, then it's free. And that is completely and utterly wrong. Open source software is not necessarily free. It may not necessarily have anything to do with being free. All it means, if you're using a piece of open source software, is that you can actually see the code that created the software. So unlike Microsoft creates a Windows operating system or creates Microsoft Office, and they will never let you see the source code. You have no idea how that software was actually created. All open source software is software where they allow you to see how it was written. So you can see where there are possible flaws, or you can see where you may be able to make things better. But this does not necessarily mean it's free. A lot of open source software is free, but a lot isn't. And so people put themselves in real legal liability, and their companies in real liability, because they don't understand this. When I took a Linux class, I had one of those horrible Linux geeks that was our instructor, and every 5 minutes he would say, free speech versus free beer. What that means in the open source community is you have free speech. Free speech is open source. It means you can see how everything was documented or how everything was created. Free beer means actually free beer. Somebody gives you something. So here's beer for you. Open source is free speech, but it's not necessarily free beer. You can see how it was written, you can see what was said in the source code, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you get it for free. Some of the pitfalls when you get into the open source world that you have to be very careful about is that they allow you to download the software and it will install on your computer, and there are no activation codes or any of that. So you think you're all set. Well, many times in the open source community, they will allow you to use their software. It's licensed for home use or non-commercial use. So you can download it to your home computer or into a little test environment at your work, and you can play with it because it's not actually being used in a business environment. You get all of the functionality, but you don't have to pay for it. But what it says in the fine print or the big print or some kind of print is that if you do use it in the commercial world, you have to pay for it. So the website you're looking at right now, everymanit.com, the flash player that is presenting this video to you is something called JW Player. Now, if you go to the jwplayer.com website, you can download the player for free and use it non-commercially for free. So you get all the functionality, you get everything you possibly want out of it if you use it for non-commercial use. But being that this is a commercial website, and I hope at some point to start making some money off of it, I had to purchase the commercial version. So I literally had to pay simply because I'm using the software on a commercial website, not for home use. And so that's something that's very important to think about when you start using open source software. The other place where they've got the gotchas on some of the open source software is they give you the software for free, so you can download the software, you can install the software, you can play with the software. But they require, the license requires a service contract. So you download the software for free and you're running along and you think you're good. Legally, you think you're fine because it's open source, you installed it, it's working. Well, the license requirements state that you have to buy a service plan for that piece of open source software. I think Red Hat Linux is famous for this, where you download the software and you think you're all fine and dandy, but then you find out that you have to pay $200 or $300 a year in support agreements. So the main thing to remember about open source software is open source is not free. For the love of God, get the thought of open source and free out of your head. It's not. Open source simply means that you are able to read the source code. That's all it is. A lot of times open source is free. Many, many times it is not free. A lot of times when you can download it and use it very easily, you are allowed to use it. The license states you can use it for home and non-commercial use for free. So you get all the functionality as long as you're not trying to run a business off of it. But as soon as you try to start running a business off of it, then you have to pay licensing fees. Again, like I say, with the video player that you're watching me through now, if Everyman IT was never going to try to make any money, I would not have had to pay a dime to use this player for free, just to use it as much as I wanted. But because this site is trying to make money, we did have to pay for it. So be careful of that. And then finally, especially when you get into things like server software, database software, stuff like that, a lot of times, again, you can download the software for free, etc. You think you're fine. In the license, it states that you are required to have a service contract on that software. So again, you download it for free. Technically, the software is free. The service contract is what costs $100,000 to $10,000 a year. So those are the things to be careful about with open source. Again, this is a huge problem in the IT world that it's just a huge problem. So now that we've talked about open source software and the pitfalls with open source software, let's talk about server licensing and the possible pitfalls there. Server licensing has gotten more complicated with the advent of virtual servers, where you have hypervisors and then you create virtual servers on top of those hypervisors, so you can run anywhere between 5 to 200 virtual computers on one physical machine. The old way that most people think about buying server licensing is that you buy a license for the box, for the server box. So if you have a server, one server, you think that you buy a license for that server and you're done. And many times that is true. For most Microsoft products, server products, that's true. And for a lot of the server products, that's true. But especially when you get into the virtual world, it changes to where you no longer simply pay for a license per the box, but they can charge you a license per socket. So a socket is each place you plug a CPU into. So if you have a dual CPU motherboard, it supports 2 CPUs on that motherboard. Every CPU you have plugged in, you may have to pay a licensing fee, and it may be $1,000 or more per socket. So be very careful of that. The socket is each full CPU that you put in there. So each Xeon processor that you put in there, you would have to pay a licensing fee on the socket. There is also sometimes per core licensing fees. Again, most people forget about this, but you have to be very careful. So you actually pay per core on that processor. So if you have a Xeon quad core, you would pay the licensing fee for 4 cores on that processor. If you have an 8-core processor, then you would have to pay a licensing fee on all 8 cores. So you may get hit with a $4,000 licensing fee simply by swapping out a processor. So be very, very careful about this. And this is why, again, I say that licensing can cause major problems in a corporation and in companies. Because if you have a systems management person, if you're trying to make a server run faster, you may just say, hey, you know, I see these 8-core processors have dropped in price. Let me just throw one of those into this server, and this server is going to run twice as fast. Well, if nobody realizes what you're doing, and if it's not caught, you throw that 8-core processor into that server, and now you're responsible for paying for 4 more cores in licensing fees. So the main thing to remember about server licensing for the box is you can either pay per box, so per physical server, you pay 1 fee. You can pay per socket. So a socket is each CPU, full CPU that you put into the machine. So you know, it might be a 4-core CPU or an 8-core CPU or a 20-core CPU. It's per CPU, so per socket. Or you may pay per core. Per core, so if you have an 8-core processor in there, you're going to be charged a licensing fee on each and every single one of those cores. Be very careful about looking for this in the licensing agreement when you decide what server software you're going to be running. So now that you've figured out what type of licensing you need for the server, and you know your heart has slowed down after you thought you were having a heart attack from the price you're going to be paying simply for the licensing of the server. Well, now you're about to have a second heart attack, because in the licensing world, you have both licenses for the box itself. So whether you pay a license for the whole server or per socket or per core, you have that license. But many times you will also have access licenses. So you just paid $1,000 or $5,000 simply for the software that's running on the computer. Now you're going to pay anywhere between $25 to $500 for every connection to the server. In the Microsoft world, these are called CALs, or Client Access Licenses. In the rest of the world, it's just connection licensing. These licenses can be done in one of 3 ways. There is a per seat license. So a per seat license means every single device that will be connected to the server needs its own license. So if you have 100 computers that will connect to the server, you simply need 100 client licenses. If you have 50 computers that connect to the server, and all 50 of those computer users have smartphones, you may have to pay then for 100 licenses to connect to that server, because each individual device is considered a seat, is considered its own device that needs a license. So however many devices will connect to that server, you will be charged the licensing fee for. You know, whether they're on 24 hours a day or whether they're on 2 hours a day, it doesn't matter. It's a per device license. You can also do a per session license. What a per session license means is, imagine you have 100 computers, but no more than 25 people are working at any one time. So you pay for the license for how many sessions are open concurrently to the server. So if you have 25 session licenses, then 25 people can be connected to the server at once. If the 26th person tries to connect to the server, they will be told something along the lines of, there's not enough licenses for you. So all that the session licenses mean is how many people can connect to the server at any one time. When you're dealing with more of the mom and pop shop databases, like customized databases or databases for very niche industries, you run into these session licenses a lot. So basically, the client, your customer will have purchased 5 or 10 session licenses, and so if they have 11 people try to connect at any one time, then that 11th person will be kicked off the system. So that's what a session license is. And the final type of license you can have is basically a user license. So every username that you have for the system has their own license, and then they can connect to the system any way they would like. So a lot of the ticketing systems, the problem management systems, they have licenses like this. So whether I'm logging in through my computer, through my laptop, or through my smartphone, it doesn't care. Basically, you just pay for a license on the per user for that system. So again, access licenses can jack the price of your server installation up a lot. When we installed Windows Small Business servers, when you buy the product, you get 5 client access licenses. If you want 5 more, it costs you $450 per pack of 5. So if you're dealing with a 20-person office, the price just went up by $1,800. So these things really, really do matter. So remember, there's the per seat license. That's for each individual device, has to have its own license. A per session license, so only the open communications, concurrent sessions, that's what gets licensed. So if you have 25 licenses, 25 people can connect at any one time. If the 26th person tries to connect, they will be told there's not enough licenses in the system. And then you have per user licenses. Again, this is used a lot for like field technician software, where people can log in however they want to log in, and you just pay one license for basically that username and password. Those are the access licenses. So since we're talking about licenses, we'll go over a little bit of Microsoft licensing. We'll talk about Microsoft specifically because, well, they own, 99% of the computer world. You're going to run into Microsoft licensing if you're a computer technician, whereas things like Oracle licensing or Mac licensing, you may legitimately never run into. The first thing to realize about Microsoft licensing is every product has different licenses associated with it. So you think about going out and getting Microsoft Office 2007, and you just think of the product. Well, that single product has numerous licenses, so numerous ways that you can purchase the product. We're going to talk about the 3 most common ways, but Microsoft has more. The first way, or the first licenses that you can use to buy one of the Microsoft products, whether it's server software or Office software or operating systems, whatever, is called OEM software. This is Original Equipment Manufacturers. So you can go to a website like newegg.com or Tiger Direct or even Amazon.com, and you can buy, let's say, Office 2007, the OEM version, and it's going to seem very inexpensive. What you have to realize about the OEM versions is this is a license for one computer. Technically, specifically, you're only supposed to use this license if you build the computer yourself. So if you build a server and you're selling it to the client, you can use an OEM license. That OEM license will be for that server and for that server only, and then you sell it to the client. In the real world, a lot of people use OEM software, even if they don't build the computer, because it is so inexpensive. The main thing that you have to realize about OEM software is it does have the whole activation procedure with it, and that software is only licensed for one computer. So if you put that software onto a laptop computer, you're taking that laptop around, you do something dumb, you trip, you break that laptop computer, you buy a new laptop computer. The license for OEM does not allow you to take the Office off of the one computer and put it onto the other. That OEM license is for that computer and that computer only, no matter what happens. So be careful about this when you're buying licenses for your client. Is OEM is only for one specific device. You then have what are called retail licenses. These are the licenses, basically you can go out to Best Buy or Staples, Office Depot, and they have the little plastic boxes, and you can buy Windows 7 Business Edition or Office 2007 or 2010. The retail version of software is a lot more expensive. It's 3 to 4 times the price of the OEM version. The difference in the licensing world between OEM and retail is when you buy the retail version of the software, you own that software forever. It is now yours. So with retail software, it can only be generally installed on one computer at a time, but you can move it to another computer. So if you bought the retail version of a piece of software, you install it on that the same laptop computer, you break that laptop computer, you can then install it onto a different laptop computer. If you break that laptop computer, you can put it onto a desktop computer. So with retail versions, generally you can only install them on one computer at once, but you own that software. It no longer belongs to that computer. You can put it on one computer, you can upgrade to another computer, to another computer, to another computer. As long as that software is only on one computer at a time, then you're fine. The last type of software that Microsoft has is something called volume licensing. And if you are a consultant or if you're the IT person in a growing business, this is what you want to use if you're buying the licenses for your company. What volume licensing allows you to do is it allows you to buy the Microsoft products without a lot of the security problems that you get in other products. So like that OEM version has complicated activation procedures and you can only activate it once. With the volume licensing, basically you own that license, so however many licenses that you own, you can put on however many computers you have. So if you own 7 licenses for Windows 7, you can install Windows 7 onto that many computers. If one of the computers dies, then you just transfer it to another computer, transfer it to another computer, transfer it to another computer. One of the other benefits of volume licensing is it's the only license that technically allows you to do imaging or ghosting. Other licenses do not allow you to do this. So what this is where you can create your perfect computer. You do something called create an image. So you run something called sysprep, and then you create an image of the computer. And then if that computer ever dies and you replace it, you can just put the new image onto another computer. This kind of goes into its whole other class. So if you don't understand imaging, that's fine. If you do understand imaging, understand you have to have a volume license for this to work. There are a lot of different prices on these volume licenses. You have to be careful. I have an arrangement with CDW when I buy licenses, because Microsoft has created this whole price scale. And if you don't know exactly which license you're buying, you could run into some really big problems. I ran into the problem in the past where I was going to buy volume licenses for one of my clients, and I created a quote based on what I thought the volume license price was. When I went to actually place the order, what I found out was the volume price that I was quoting was the wrong volume price. That was for if the people had 1,000 computers or more. Since they only had 20 computers, the volume license that I had to buy actually cost twice as much. So I went from thinking that the Office software I was going to sell them was going to cost $250 to finding out it was going to cost $450. So when you get into volume licensing, I strongly recommend that you call up CDW and let them tell you what you need, because volume licensing is its whole, again, as I say, a whole kettle of fish. It is what you should use if you're in a company, probably with 10 or more people, but you have to, there's a lot of pitfalls when you start using volume licensing, so you have to make sure you understand what you're buying. So again, Microsoft licenses. There's 3 general licenses. There's OEM, Original Equipment Manufacturer. This is a very inexpensive license for all the normal software that you use. But understand, that license goes with that particular computer. If that computer dies, it gets obsolete, etc., you cannot transfer the license legally to another computer. There's the retail version. Retail versions of software are a lot more expensive. They're about 3 to 4 times as expensive as an OEM version, but you own that software forever. So you can put it on one computer, but if this computer dies, you can put it on the next computer, you can put it on the next computer, you can put it on the next computer. The retail version allows you to do that. And then finally, the volume license, again, is what you should be looking at. If you have a growing company, it'll save you a lot of time and energy. Instead of having to worry about CDs, you can actually download all the software that you own straight from Microsoft's website. They keep all the CD keys for you and all that kind of stuff. Again, if you're going to be doing imaging or ghosting for the computers that you have on your network, you need volume licensing. None of the other licenses allow you to do this. And again, it just makes your life a lot easier. So that's Microsoft licensing. Again, with the volume stuff, call CDW. I don't make a dime from CDW for telling you this, but it's going to make your life a lot easier. And so, of course, now we're talking about licensing, we've got to talk about piracy. We've got to talk about illegally using software. And what I will tell you, if you're a consultant or anything else, don't. Just don't. Don't agree to work on pirated software. Don't install pirated software. Don't bother with pirated software. I'm not saying this from a legal perspective. I'm not saying this because Microsoft told me I should say this, or FBI told me I should say this. I'm telling you from the real world, pirated software is just a pain in the ass. And frankly, here's the deal. If your client is forcing you to try to use pirated software, they're probably going to be a pain in the ass. And so basically, it's a win-win. Don't use pirated software, and if your client tries to make you use it, fire them, because they're going to cause you problems in the long run. The reason you don't want to use pirated software is, first, there's the whole legal Megillah. I don't know. I've heard theories, I've heard myths and rumors that anybody has ever actually gotten nailed for using pirated software. In 12 years in this business, working in the corporate world, working in the business world, I've never seen it actually happen. So the main reason I'm telling you not to use pirated software is not because the FBI is going to swoop down and give you the $10,000 per license violation fine. I suppose it happens. I guess it happens. But I haven't seen it. The problem with pirated software is, especially now that there's all the activation procedures and everything, is that if they're using pirated software, they're not allowed to download and install all of the security and all of the updates that software or the operating system needs to run properly. So what I found that happens in the real world is they're unable to download all the updates because they're using pirated software, and then they're going to start having problems because some program won't work right, the printer doesn't print right, whatever it is. You're going to go there and you're going to scratch your head and you're going to try to figure out what's going on for about an hour, and you're going to bill them for an hour, and you're billing at them at $100+ an hour while you're sitting there trying to figure out what's going on. What you're going to find out is that the computer needs to be updated. If you've worked on computers any length of time, Microsoft Tuesday. Every Tuesday, patches come out, updates come out. So you have to install all those updates. And if you install all those updates, it fixes lots of problems. Fixes 95% of the problems, just updating all the updates on the computer. Well, if they have pirated software, then they're not going to be able to get those updates. And then you're not going to be able to fix the computer. So then you're going to tell them that they need to buy the legal software, and then you need to do all the maintenance to make the computers legal. And it's going to end up costing them a lot of money, because now they've paid $100 for you to figure out what the problem is. They're then going to pay, what's the migration cost going to be? 2 or 3 hours? Another $200 to $300 to get you, just so you can set up the system so that's legal, plus the $200 to $300 in licensing fees. So if they had simply purchased the software legally to begin with, they would have paid $200 or $300. Now they're going to pay $800, maybe more, plus their employee's going to have downtime, and it's just going to be a bad thing. The other thing, what you're going to find in the real world, is if they're refusing to pay for legal software, guess who they're also going to refuse to pay? And this is the bite in the butt. If they are so cheap that they're trying to run their business off of either pirated software or software they don't have the appropriate licenses for, they are going to bitch, whine, moan, and complain when you give them the bill, because you're billing them at $100 an hour. So you're going to say, I was here an hour or two. The reason I could not fix the problem is because you're using pirated software. And then they're going to say, why should I pay you $200? You didn't fix the problem. You're going to say, but it's because you're using illegal software. And then it goes into this horrible little spiral where everybody hates each other. So use legal software. Get your clients to use legal software. The other problem with a lot of this pirated software is now that there's all these torrent sites out there, so you can download Photoshop, you can download Windows, you can download all this for free, and it works. A lot of times those torrents actually have viruses in them. One of the guys that I had here at the shop used to laugh because so many of the people that came in for computer repairs, for tune-ups and getting rid of viruses, so many of them had all of this illegal Adobe software that he knew they didn't know how to use. Like, everybody thinks that they need to have Photoshop on their computer. I don't know why. It's really complicated. It's a pain in the butt piece of software, but everybody thinks that they need Photoshop on their computer. So they go out and they download an illegal version, a pirated version of Photoshop, and they install it on their computer. Well, they're never actually going to use it. They're never really going to understand how to use Photoshop. But when they installed the software on the computer, it also brought in viruses. So now, basically, they got a free piece of software that they're never going to use, but their computer is now infected with viruses, and now they're going to have to clean up that whole mess. So this is, and you just use legal software. I'm telling you, been in the business a long time, don't use the right licenses, use legal software, and everybody will be happier. And again, if you're a consultant and your client refuses to use the right licenses and refuses to use legal software, this is warning sign. This is when bells should go off in your head. This is when you pack up your bag and you walk the hell out. Because remember, if they're not going to pay for legal software, there's a good chance they're not going to pay your bill either. So just say no to piracy. It's bad. All the way around, it's bad. So that's the basic overview for licensing. The main thing I just want you to realize, come out of this, is that licensing can just be a horrible, horrible, horrible nightmare. So before you buy a product, before you put a server into the production environment, make sure you understand the licensing requirements. In the real world, in big corporations, they have a huge problem because a lot of their techs will download, let's say, this open source software, they'll create some little ticketing system, and they're just happy as peas in a pod. And they're fine, and it doesn't seem like any big deal until a manager comes in and goes, wow, that looks like a cool system. Can we use that too? And the person says, sure, why not? And then another person wants to use it, another person wants to use it, another person wants to use it. And all of a sudden, this little stupid system that wasn't supposed to do much of anything for anybody is now supporting 100 to 1,000 users. This is what happens in the real world. And then all of a sudden, that little free box that nobody was worrying about the price for, now all of the licensing requirements, it might be a $10,000 or $20,000 box. That's not a joke. That's what really happens in the real world. So again, you can play around with whatever you want, but before you put the computer into the production environment, make sure what the licensing requirements are. It can just be evil. And we talked about open source. Again, open source does not mean free. I don't know why everybody thinks it does, but it don't. All open source means is that you're able to read the source code. You're able to see the code that created the software. It can be free, but it doesn't mean that it is free. Many times, a lot of these pieces of open source software, they will give you a license for them to use for home or non-commercial use, and you get all the functionality, you get all the power, as long as you don't try to make any money using it. As soon as you put that software into a commercial environment, then you have to pay licensing fees, and it can be steep. It can go all the way from free to $1,000 simply for what you're using the server for. Again, also with open source is they have a little trick of they give you the software for free, but the license requires that you have a service contract. So it really confuses people, and I think open source probably likes that because they know the customer thinks, ooh, this is free, and then they do all the planning, they do all the migration, they do all the implementation, and then they find out that, oh, we have to pay X, $100 or $1,000 per year for this service contract. This service contract is required for this software. We talked about the server licensing, so the box itself. You can either have a license for the entire server, so the entire just physical server. You can have a license per socket, so that means per CPU that's in that server, or a license per core. So an 8-core Xeon processor will cost more than a 2-core Xeon processor. These are all possibilities. I don't know what you're going to run into in the real world, but this is what I have actually seen. Especially now that if you're dealing with the virtualization software, be very, very careful of this. We've talked about the access licenses. So you just paid $1,000, $5,000, God knows how many thousands of dollars for the server, and you think you're good. Not yet. Not yet. Almost every piece of software or operating system out there requires that you have client access licenses. So whether it's per seat, so this means per device, every device that is going to connect to the server, it needs a license. It's per session. This means however many people are going to be connected to the server at any one time. Like I say, if you have 25 users connected to the server, if the 26th one tries to connect, they will say there's not enough licenses. You will run into this with the smaller businesses, especially the niche software out there. It really uses the session licenses much more than it does the seat licenses. And then of course, there's just user licenses. So every single user you have has to have a license. All these licenses, like I say, from Microsoft, a client access license literally usually runs you about $50. We talked about the Microsoft licenses. There's the OEM. This is the cheapest version of Microsoft licensing, but this is per device. So you're only really supposed to sell it if you sell the person the entire computer. Most people don't do that in the real world. Most people go to newegg.com and buy it afterwards. But still, regardless, you buy that one license, it goes to one computer. You drop that laptop, not only do you buy a new laptop, but you buy a new license too. There's the retail version. This is where you go to Best Buy or Staples. You buy the license and you're allowed to put that on one computer at a time, but you can use it until the end of time. So if this computer dies, you put it on the next computer. This computer dies, you put it on the next computer, etc. And then there are volume licensing. Volume licenses is what you should be using if you have a company with 10 people or more, and especially if it's growing. Volume licenses is where you actually have an agreement with Microsoft. You're able to download all the software that you have a licensing agreement for. You get the license for however many licenses you have. You can put that software onto that many computers. So if you have 5 licenses for Windows 7, you can install Windows 7 onto 5 computers. If one of them dies, you just replace that computer and you can have Windows 7 on that one too. This volume licensing is the only licensing that allows you to do disk imaging or ghosting. Just keep that in mind. We talked about the piracy. Just don't do it. I swear to God, I swear, just don't. I swear to you, in the real world, in the real business world, if you're dealing with real businesses, piracy just don't make sense. I mean, you have to understand, when I was running a repair shop, we were spending up to $1,000 a day to basically keep the lights on, to pay for employees, to pay for BG&E, to pay for all this stuff. Running a business is very expensive. So realistically, software cost, even server software at $600 a pop, is nothing to a real business. I mean, if they're worried about the cost of using legal software, they have much bigger issues than legal software. Because like I said, when you're running a real business, if you have any number of employees, $150, $200 for an operating system, $200 for office software is nothing. It really, 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 really is nothing. So if they're worried about that, this is when flags and bells and whistles and all that should go off in your head. Because again, if they don't want to use legal software, I'm telling you, this has happened to me in the real world, they don't want to pay the bill either. So that's just how it is. The final thought I will give you also with the server software is, remember, different pieces of server software may need their own licenses. So this is where things get really expensive, foolishly fast. So you buy, especially in the Windows environment, we'll give you the example. So you buy a server and you put Windows 2008 Server Standard Edition on there. So that's $600. And then let's say you have 10 people. So you have to buy 5 more client access licenses because it comes with 5. So that's now $10,000 or $1,050. Well, now you want Microsoft Exchange. Exchange is going to cost you $1,000. Plus the licenses for Exchange is going to cost you an amount of money. Now, if you have a database server, then you have to buy the database server plus the access licenses for that database server. So I mean, the prices on this stuff can get astronomical very fast, and that's why you have to sit down with a little pen, pad, and paper and write out and figure out what the overall cost of this thing is going to be. Because, like I say, if you have one Windows server with Exchange and Microsoft SQL, plus all the client access licenses, oh, it'll just get brutal. It'll just get brutal. So at the bottom of this, I'm going to give the contact information for CDW. Again, I don't make a dime if you call CDW. I don't get a dime if you call my contact down there. I just believe in sharing the wealth. You know, she's done well by me, so hopefully I'll do well by her. I don't make a dime. If you're thinking about buying volume licensing, though, do give them a call. They will give you a quote. So you don't have to spend a dime. They will write everything out and they will give you a full quote about what you need, and they will make sure you buy the right product and that you quote out the right price on a proposal. Don't be like me. My proposal was $2,000 off. That was just a painful, bad, horrible day simply because I didn't understand which licensing I was supposed to be looking at. So again, I'm Eli the Computer Guy. I'm glad you stayed with me to this point because I'm telling you, not enough people worry about licensing, and this is part of being a professional. You know, it's not just about fixing servers and swapping hard drives. Licensing is a big issue. So this was Understanding Licensing. I look forward to seeing you at the next class.